Black women, young Black women, are very much on the front lines and at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. With a safe space for these incredible activists and organizers to conversate, we delve deeper into who they are, what they do, and the goals they're trying to accomplish, whilst also amplifying their voices. This is an inside look at the organic bond between Black women and their movements that are changing the world for the better. This conversation is meant to serve as a deep look at what connects us as activists, as women, as sisters, as human beings. This is GenZ Girl Gang, a seat at the table, the Black Women's Activist Roundtable.
Okay, so we're recording. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jade Walker, and I am the Influencer and Brand and Partnerships Executive here at GenZ Girl Gang. And today we are kicking off our GGG seat at the table with the Black Women Activist Roundtable. Black women are very much on the front lines and at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. GenZ Girl Gang wanted to provide a safe space for these incredible activists and organizers to conversate and delve deeper into who they are, what they're doing, and their goals they're trying to accomplish. This is an inside look at the organic bond between women and their movements that are changing the world for the better. And to give a rundown of everybody who's at this table, even though it's not that round and we're not really in person, we have Miss Nia-White. Nia-White is a 17-year-old political, civil, and social justice activist. She is a student at Hampton University majoring in political science and minor with communications. Proud leader, organizer of a youth-led organization called Freedom March NYC, working on policy reform, civic engagement, and the mobilization of the community. Being the youngest on the team, she focuses on advocating the voice for the youth and other Black women. Working at organizations like Black Women's Blueprint and We Believe Incorporated, she spreads her message through organizing nonviolent protests throughout New York City, features with CNN, Forbes, and several other platforms to amplify the work that needs to be done to create a better future for generations to come. And next, we have Miss Brianna Taylor. Brianna Taylor, she, hers, is an 18-year-old first-generation Barbadian American from Long Island, New York, and a senior at Friends Academy. Well, just graduated and you just started school. Today was your first day at college. She is passionate about advocating for gun violence prevention, criminal justice reform, mental health, and women's reproductive rights and safety. This is evidenced by her relentless work with March for Our Lives New York as an organizer and lobbyist and a Black Lives Matter advocate. Brianna has served as the president of her school's diversity committee, a member of the March for Our Lives Long Island executive board, and interned for legislator Kevin Abraham, a United Nations intern, a Girls Leadership Worldwide alumni, and a 2017 Harvard University Youth Advisory Board member. Currently, she serves a youth representative and organizer for New York Assemblywoman Taylor Darling. Can you hear my dog stopping? Because that's what he's doing right now, but hopefully not. A Black-owned magazine, and she just now recently has become the operations lead at the Unplugged Collective, a Black-owned magazine that features and prioritizes the experiences of Black women. It is her mission as an activist to bring awareness to the system of oppression that are plaguing our nation and to hold accountable those who chose to blind themselves to the many injustices in our country. And next we have Melissa Denizard, a native of Haiti. Melissa Denizard is a 21-year-old pro-Black organizer, activist, and documentarian. Along with providing a grounding for her political ideology and practice, Black feminism serves as a guiding light for Melissa's perpetual self-reflection. Melissa uses several mediums, including public speaking, film, digital media, and written word to help innovate Gen Z's approach to political theory and discourse, specifically in regards to how we address issues relating to race, gender, and social class within the United States political framework. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Eva Lewis. Eva Marie Lewis is a seeker of liberation, student artist, and organizer from the South Side of Chicago. She is the founder of the Free Root Operation, which combats gun violence through a lens of healing and opportunity. Eva wants to see all of her people free and joyous. It is this vision that drives her work. And so, thank you. I'm gonna give y'all a round of a hand because you guys just inspire me, and that's why I wanted to start this. Just seeing all your work that you've been doing and all of us being like individually connected, whether it be through social media or meetings. I just wanted to get you guys together and have you speak because you're people that inspire me truly. And so to jump right in, we have our first question. what did you all want to be when you grew up? I ask this because we all have stories and aspirations that are aside from our racial equality justice work that we do. And maybe these ideas, we didn't always see how our race or gender would impact us in the position that we wanted to be. Anyone want to go first?
I can jump in. I can start off. So for me, it took a lot of different turns. When I was little, I said I was going to be a pediatrician because for some reason I thought like I was very sciencey and into like chemicals and experiments and things like that. So I said I was going to be a doctor. And then I got to 6th grade and I hated science. So I just said I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. Then I said I was going to be a lawyer. And then when I told my family, they said that lawyers have to lie and I don't like lying. So I said I wasn't going to be a lawyer anymore. And then in 7th grade, being the only Black girl in my grade at the time, I was often just constantly having to speak out on issues pertaining to Black Lives Matter and just being Black because, you know, there was no one there offering that perspective or holding space for that. And in about 7th grade, my social studies class had a conversation about Mike Brown, and I saw how desensitized and uneducated my peers were, that literally a fire was just ignited in me that I had to do this work, not just for, you know, our society, but like as a survival mechanism for myself. So at this point right now, I know that whatever I do has to be a work of service and a work of advocacy, whichever route that takes. Hopefully it'll take a federal and congressional route, God willing, but that's really what the plan is right now for me.
I was like, I had a moment where I realized that there are people who were younger than me who saw Trayvon Martin get killed, and Mike Brown. Like when Mike Brown was killed, I was like 15. I could not imagine being a preteen, like middle school. That's crazy.
Yeah.
To be jolted into that work like so early. I was like, we were very problematic in 7th grade.
Yeah, seventh like the unholy year in middle school. So having it already be terrible on top of like racism and being like a little 12 and 13-year-old kid. Yeah.
Could not even imagine.
I feel that 100% because I also grew up in Long Island, and it's incredibly segregated. And the town that I grew up in was not diverse in the slightest, even though people love to think that they are because they're liberal or whatnot. And it was a hard experience trying to navigate both racism and like the complexities of what it is that school comes with at the same time.
Yeah. What I was going to say is like, I love that question that you started off with that question, because I think that the culture that, at least for the last couple of years that we've been engulfed in, is one that's like, listen to Black women or look to Black women and fixing the situation and cleaning up the mess that's been made. And a realization that I had the other day is that like, we say listen to Black women and more so look to Black women to fix the mess that's been made, but I don't necessarily think we give the responsibility to Black women to imagine a new way forward. And so lately, especially during the pandemic, I've really had a lot of time to reflect upon my relationship to work, more so like how like capitalism has really eroded my relationship to joy. And it's really challenged me to think back to what I wanted to be when I was younger and what brought me joy when I was younger. And I really wanted to be a singer. Like I really, really love to sing. Like I used to make songs. Like when I was walking down the street, I used to sing really loudly.
Come on, pipe.
And then...
Come on. Come on.
And like I remember one time I was in the shower, because you know your voice always sounds chef's kiss
amazing
in the shower.
A1.
And I was in the shower and like the window was open and I was singing, and in my head I was like, I really hope a Hollywood executive hears me because I want to get discovered so bad. And that's one of my most embarrassing stories, but like that ass, like I really wanted to be a singer, wanted to be a writer, wanted to be all like just a creator in all different ways. And I think like as I got older and as like resources were stripped away from my school district, because we lost arts and music due to budget cuts around like the time that I finished middle school. It's kind of those things kind of just went away, and then I started getting into social justice work. And I was 14. It was about 2014, around that time as well when I started. And no one really knew what activists and organizers did. So people were just like, you should be a lawyer or you should be a politician. And I was like, child, I don't want to do none of that. So I think overall, it's like really reflecting on how my dreams have been eroded by capitalism, by white supremacy, and by all the people around me who have told me what I can and cannot do. So.
I like that. You brought up capitalism, and I was watching a video that you were talking about on your Instagram about the activist industrial complex that is a new way of Gen Z. And like you were saying, and I don't want to so cut me off if I'm like misconstruing your words in any way, but you were saying how there's just this mindset that Gen Z comes with, in the sense that like we were like, we're the people that are supposed to change things, that we're supposed to shake things up, so much so that the idea of activism and being a job or an occupation has been so like convoluted and mixed up that it has really created this like system of people who do more harm than they do good. Did I get that right?
Around, yeah. Like I've just been thinking a lot too about like how capitalism and white supremacy erodes our work and permeates our work without us even noticing it. And I think especially when it comes to politics and social justice work, like the state is going to operate in the way that it's been operating for years and centuries. And I think that like we have to be really vigilant about noticing like when are certain things being done to divide us even more so, or to bring our work onto a course that we never really wanted it to go down. And I think it's really understanding that like as we're fighting for this better world for Black folks and Indigenous folks, that we really have to be vigilant. And we also have to understand that white supremacy and capitalism and all these other isms, they can't come with us. Like that future that we're building, there's no room for that there. So I think it's like always keeping yourself in check and really reflecting on the work that you're doing, who you're doing it for, and you know, what's the North Star for you.
On that topic, I know we're supposed to be talking about what we want it to be,
but I can go off.
Okay, on that though, I've been thinking about how there are so many people who get into this work as a young person. Like I started organizing when I was like 16, but I got like attention when I was 17. And there's so many people who, it's not even the person, like Gen Z, we are new here. Honestly, nobody is going to be the same that they are right now. I'm 21. I'm not going to be the same person now when I'm 23 and so forth. I'm not the same person I was when I was 18, but we're kind of being groomed to occupy a seat without like
say that shit.
without even being like cognizant of what that entails. Like I did this stuff, and if I did not have discernment, and people talking to me, like I might have also been a type of person that got away from the work and became a product rooted around the brand of the work.
And I just want to echo what I'm sorry, I always want to say Ava, but Eva is saying. All of that is so real. And the thing is, like, because we're so young, like, I love to give my peers grace, young people grace, etc. Because the beauty about being a young organizer, young activist, a young person in general is that you get to experiment. Like, you get to really, like, find your footing and decide, like, what are you really good at? What do you want to find more about? And what do you not want to do anymore? But I think the issue is that there are, because of the mandate that was given to Gen Z, and because companies were given such a long time to catch up and fix their marketing and messaging to cater to young people, I think what's happening is like some young people are turning that experimentation into lucrative brands. And I think that's the issue, is that, like, are we truly thinking about our actions, and are we truly thinking about the people who will be held as collateral during this process of our growth and our maturation?
Right.
I hear that, because I've been thinking about that too, just like growing and like stepping into my power as an activist, and like also doing different things, and like going to school, and like just going to a business school, and like learning about like what business is and like what that means. I've been saying, and I've always been saying, like the more that like I've stepped into leadership roles as an activist or an organizer, it's like I'm like, a job as an activist is for inevitably for it to end, for your job, the thing that you're fighting for, to cease to exist. So to put like so much business and like idea of earning behind it, I understand like there's like the tug between like educators need to get paid, the people who are doing this work, this heavy lifting of the work, which is a lot of the times us Black women, and we haven't been paid the same, or like paid even what we deserved. I'm like, so I get that, but I'm also at the same time, we shouldn't get it twisted that this is like a means to like ride the wave until the end, and then it doesn't make sense. I'm like, so where's the stopping point? Like, what is the end goal?
I think that part, like that whole conflict, has to do with here I am stepping to the spiritual bag, but the lack of spirituality in the work. I feel like this work has always amongst our people it's supposed to be like deeply spiritual. You have a calling. Like, this is, for me, I was raised on the Bible. Like, in my head, I'm like, this is the continuation of what Moses was doing, etc. But so many people see this as a physical thing, like, oh, we just want to get them to pass a bill. But in reality, like, if you take the White House down, if you take Parliament in the UK down, like if you take all these structures down, like it's just people. And the real work is healing. And the real work, when I say liberation, I mean like you are able to do what you need to do in order to thrive. It's not like, oh, I need XYZ person to say yes to me being a being. It's like, I want to be fully free and have agency. And when we say, I don't even identify as an activist no more. I literally I took it out, like out the bio, because when we started like putting all of the focus into activism and not, oh, I want to help heal my community, I want to help so many people achieve agency over themselves and over their then it's easy to get caught up in, I'm an activist, I will speak as an activist. Because you're saying, oh, well, if we're fighting for XYZ thing that we're fighting for to end, if you're looking at it from a healing lens, your job is never done. So how are you going to help the community catch up once the legislation is passed? How are you going to help people stay free amongst themselves? What life are you going to speak into people? That's ongoing.
I'm getting high.
I'm just so glad that there's another Black woman who understands that this work is beyond the physical, because I've been in so many activist spaces where nobody recognizes that what we do goes beyond like the physicality of Congress or a congressperson or legislation. Like, there is a spirit in this country that is evil, that has penetrated the government that we're in. This is why, like, I pray before every march I attend. I pray before I speak. I pray while I march. Like, I make sure that my God is with me while I do this. Because without him, like, my physical being is not what's been sustaining me in this work. Because we all know that this work is hard. And it's spiritually tolling. I wake up days and my spirit is heavy. So when I use this work as a way of, making money, and I forget that, like, for me, this is God's work. This is God using me and using, people around me as a medium for his work and his glory. And that's what keeps me going with this. It's not a paycheck. It's not, likes on an Instagram flick or, how many times a video gets shared. It's just like, God he's using us, and he's using, his discernment and his glory to get this work done. That's why, like, it always has to be beyond what we do and like what's on social media or what's like in a news cycle at that point in time. Because like Eva said, this work it's not ending. So there's going to be no amount of paychecks that's going to be able to stabilize me enough in this work if my community hasn't caught up with the healing.
And there's a God in me.
Amen.
That's also why the work can be capitalistic, because if this is spiritual work, then we need the space for our spirits to recalibrate. We cannot always be expected to produce and put out, but we need the time to focus, sit with the ancestors, sit with our spirit guide, sit with God, and be like, what's my next step? Literally order my steps. Then him.
That's I have these conversations a lot, especially with my mom, who's like been in like activist work, or whether or not like she's even thought as that, and raising 7 children, like basically, yeah, me being the youngest of 7, like on her own, and she has this incredible connection with God, and like being a Christian woman is something that she truly believes in, and she always talks with me about it. And I think that's like an intergenerational thing, as well as like there's like I feel like Gen Z, we like to joke about the depth of religion and like where it goes to, and then I think that broadens the gap between like our parents or like our grandparents and like the people who have been fighting for like years ahead of us to get to even where we are right now. And which leads me to like my other question about how, and if we want to come back, we can talk about what we want it to be when we get older. But also I don't want to take up too much time, so I want to like round up. But Gen Z has played an integral role in Black Lives Matter, but there is no denying the impact and influence of older generations have had to mobilize this movement. That got me thinking a lot about how we move forward collectively as a movement that's intergenerationally moved. And Brianna, I know that being that you were currently serving under as like a youth representative and organizer for New York Assemblywoman Taylor Darling, like what are your thoughts on this? And then everybody can jump in as well.
I have loved so much working for Assemblywoman Darling for a multitude of different reasons. She, as a physical person, has embodied everything I wanted to be: dark skin, natural hair, political representative. And she's someone who also very heavily believes in this intergenerational connection. For me personally, I found it to be so important after I started to take the steps that some of my ancestors took. So being at the March on Washington recently was an incredibly solidifying moment for me in that, because you just felt the spirit of, Martin Luther King, John Lewis, Bayard Rustin, all these people who were by his side in this work, that, sometimes I have to check myself when I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this today, or, I don't want to write this, or I don't want to go here. But, like I said, I'm doing this for something so beyond myself. I'm doing this for future generations. And I'm also like, I'm my ancestors' dreams. Like, starting college today at George Washington University, that would not have been possible without people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Bell Hooks, Shirley Chisholm, who paved the way for me to be even at the space of higher education. So having reverence for them is so deeply important to me.
100%. And you mentioned the March on Washington, and Nia, you're a lead organizer at Freedom March NYC, who was a lead organization on the recent March on Washington. And the Civil Rights March in the 60s was led by prominent Black men. And now this most recent one on Washington was headed by prominent young Black women. And you made a post, which was a side-by-side of both Civil Rights March on Washington, and you captioned the photo, "It's not history, it's herstory." So I wanted to know, like, what was that moment in this movement like for you as a young Black woman who's just 17 years old, on the cusp of adulthood, on the cusp of just greatness, and in greatness, not even on the cusp, but just like in it. And like, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, definitely. Wow. So right when I start talking, my dog wants to bark. I apologize. Yeah, so if I'm too silent, it's because I've just loved having the opportunity to listen to Black women preach and talk the talk. So that's why I had just really just been zoned in. So honestly, the March on Washington was an amazing experience. And honestly, when I say the fact of it's not history, it's her story, it's really just to attest to the truth that Black women have been leading so many marches, and Black women have been outside for so many reasons. And for so many issues and so many isms out there, and they've just been there to support and amplify the voices of so many controversial things, but they haven't been given the actual support that they need to do this work. So it's really just crazy when we think back to the civil rights organizations that were leading. There was Black women leading them as well, but they weren't given the attention that they actually needed. They weren't given the support that they actually needed. And when we think now about it, when we say support a Black woman, it's because we're trying to say that when you get up in these buildings and you're attesting to the fact, or you're trying to amplify the fact that Black lives matter, you're forgetting that Black women are inside of that life as well. So really, when I say it's that it's not his story, it's her story, it's because people just seem to forget. So it's really just a little reminder for them, honestly. And really, when I think about myself as a 17-year-old, really on the cusp of becoming an adult and doing this work, it's very, how would I put it? It's very challenging at times. Like today, like the other day, I had went out with my friends and I was just like, dang, should I post these type of stuff? Maybe I should only be posting about like Black Lives Matter. Maybe this is the only thing that needs attention. But then I also have to remember, like, Black joy is also resistance. So in the same sense of the fact that I'm trying to, exactly like Eva and the rest of the females have said, like the same fact that I'm trying to heal for myself, I have that duty to make sure that I'm enjoying my life, because there's many Black lives that have been lost to the fact that they weren't able to enjoy their full life. So it's really my duty to also fight for freedom for my people, as well as enjoy my life for my people. So really just being 17 and trying to be a part of this revolution that that's been amongst us, really is just remembering, like, I'm not the revolution, I'm the revolutionary. So it's really just trying to center myself as a young person doing this work and remembering, like, Nia, you can sit back, you can twerk to Megan, you can go out if you want to, you can you can relax if you want to, you can sleep in bed if you want to, because you also have to remember, like, you can't be strong for anyone else if you're not strong for yourself. So that's 100%. Really how that's really how 17 me is just and feeling lately.
So beautiful, because those are things that I wasn't thinking about when I was 17. So many of the people I know were not thinking about when we were young, and I burnt out at 20 years old, and I took a year. I took a whole year and healed. I took a whole year and prioritized my healing. And I'm so glad that you know these things, you hold these facts to be true, and you're trying to protect your energy so that you don't make the same mistakes that some of us did, and then you last longer, you do better things. Your skin stays
clear. It's so true. Listen, my skin low-key been clearing up since I've been out here, and I'm just like, amen, preach on. And it's really just remembering, like, Nia, you're still young. Like, I started college like at Hampton the 10th, I believe I started classes, and I just remember, like, I'm doing all this virtually. I ended up having to, let me give you guys a little backstory. So my professor ended up telling me that I won't be able to use the March on Washington as a excuse for class. So I was literally on virtual class during the March on Washington. And I also had an exam that was due that same day. I ended up doing the exam on my drive back home. So really, it's just trying to create a balance in this world, because really 2020 has been hitting us very differently. So it's really just trying to find the balance, and also just trying to sustainably do this work, because like we know, this work isn't going to stop just once we get this person out of office or this person out of the chair. This work also has to be done inside of our communities, inside of our hospitals, inside of police enforcement, inside of every entity of the Black community.
Exactly. And I also want to speak to the Gen Z of it all, being able to multitask, being on your phone in a Zoom class, and then being on the train, taking an exam, and then just also our not inability, but our unwillingness to compromise on things that we truly believe in, I think is something that's so entirely incredibly beautiful from like our generation. I know there's like different ways that other generations view us. But that's something that I'm constantly saying when I'm talking about Gen Z, is like, we don't feel like we should have to compromise. And especially as Black women, we've compromised so much so through our entire lives, through our ancestors' lives, through our parents' lives, through our mothers, like through our grandmothers. And like, I just think there's like enough is enough. And so to hear you just like being like, okay, bet, I still won't, like, I'm gonna be in class, but like, I'll be at the March on Washington too.
Right.
Like, the resilience of it all, it's incredibly beautiful.
And then when we talk about compromising inside of like, as being a Black woman, like Black women have shown up and brought these issues to everyone's attention for so long, for so many years, and then we get pushed to the back, and then we get forgotten, and then we get silenced. So it's really just remembering like, now is the time. We can never say enough is enough. We can't just say that. Like, after that, we also have to put our actions where our mouth is. We also have to put our actions where these hashtags and these black boxes are coming from. Like Gen Z, like there's this quote that I did for a previous interview, and I had said, Gen Z is not the generation to mess with, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Like, when we say that it stops now, we say it because we have so long been dealing with this, and it's so traumatizing to us. So when we are built with so many social media mechanisms and Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, what else? Instagram, Kick, I don't even know. Like, there's so many different things that we grew up on, and there's no excuse that we have to just say, okay, a black box is enough for us. There's no excuse to say, okay, I'm gonna use one justice hashtag and it's gonna be enough. So it's really just remembering, like, since Gen Z has been equipped with so many materials and so many privileges that the past civil rights generations haven't had, we have a duty to continue this work and continue to amplify voices like Black women, like Black trans women. So we just have to continue this fight because we have a right to.
I would
Exactly.
like this to bring up the fact that people talk about why Gen Z is different and the tools that we have. A lot of times people talk about media. I like to bring up something that's not media. I think that we're in a really unique position because the 60s like is a generation. Like, if you experience the 70s and like post civil rights, the result of that is about two generations ago. I don't know, but like my mom experienced the 70s. And I feel like a lot of people, like, if you went through like Jim Crow and some of these like very overtly violently racist things, you probably like might say, oh, this is better because you had a break. But I feel like we witnessed that small bit of like, we not witnessed it, but we hear our parents and we hear our grandparents talk about post-civil rights, and then the war on drugs, and then the projects, and then the projects being torn down, and then the formation of gangs, and then the gangs no longer serving the community. And we just see all these things, and it just paints a picture of racial gaslighting. We're told, oh, we're free, but we have the ability, like the bird's eye view, to look back, not having been within it, not having been racially lit, but to see the racial gaslighting, and like, you can't trick us into thinking that we're free. Because I feel like people before us, in a way, were fighting, and there were things that we needed to fight for. Like, we needed to fight to be able to enter the restaurant. We needed to fight to have integrated bathrooms. We needed to fight to be able to live on this block. And they can't give us the physical things, the small things anymore at this point. Like, what we're asking for right now is true freedom. We're asking for true liberation. And I think that that's what makes our generation different as well, because there's no folding room.
I did just want to add something. I think just talking about like the conversations around Gen Z in general, I think like when we talk about Gen Z, there also has to be an understanding that like the mandate that was given to Gen Z about changing the world and being the future, it was a very, very generalized mandate, saying like assuming that everyone in Gen Z thinks this way is a long shot. And I think what that does in the long run is it does hinder our movement building and the way that we relate to one another as organizers, as activists, as people just doing this work. Because I think overall, like at some point, we don't really and I'm generalizing now by saying we, but I think it's important to just understand that like we don't all think the same, and we're not all going to have the same approach to this work, and we're not all going to have the same end game in mind. And so like when we say that like Gen Z is doing the work, or Gen Z is like gung-ho, like all about social justice and Black liberation, and the end of capitalism, that's not the case. And so I think it's important to name that, because when we talk about Gen Z, it sometimes feels like we're like, it's just a hodgepodge of people who are just like, yeah, we got to end this shit. But I think what I'm reminded of all the time, and when I think about our elders, is that they did not all agree on the same approach to liberation. And so I think it's important to name that and be able to address that. And I don't know the word I'm looking for, but just being able to address that in real time is going to be really important for the future of our movements and how we relate to one another.
So it's definitely so true. But really, when we think about this work and the work that everyone's doing, and also the fact that Gen Z is doing it and so many other generations are doing it, we also want to think of the unique time period that we're in with the other pandemic. So when we think about COVID and the uniqueness of it, everyone's home and everyone has the social medias literally at their hand and at their will. So it's really just the one task that everyone is able to do, amplify. Everyone has been very increasingly been on social media during this stay at home time period. So really, COVID has been a hidden blessing, I would say, to the fact of Black Lives Mattering. So it's really just been a fact that we need to use this time and make sure that while we're using this time, we're amplifying voices, we're making sure that this work is getting done. And it's so crazy that it's so crazy, but it's also amazing how everyone's still able to come out and show up, especially during this time when their life can still be at risk, especially allies, especially Black people. So it's just amazing to me.
I hear that. That has me thinking about these two other questions. So it's like a two-parter, but I'll do one at a time. I hear often that our generation needs to get organized in order to evoke change, and that's coming from like older generations, and that the Black Lives Matter movement was also criticized when it first started as lacking in organization. Oprah, for example, has held this critic at one point, and she's another conversation entirely, but would any of you agree that with this criticism? And if so, in what ways do you think we can change that? And if you don't agree, why do you feel that people have this perception?
Just quickly, I feel as though people have the perception that our generation isn't organized. I'm not sure why, due to the fact that I see so many organizations that are Black women-led, youth-led, and has been leading this movement for so long, even before the horrible death of George Floyd. So it's really just odd to me how older civil rights organizations feel as though that we're not organized when we have been at the front lines for so long, been doing this work for so long, and even putting our bodies on the line even during this time to fight racism as well as fight COVID. So it's really just odd to me, the perception that the youth isn't organized, because if you think the youth isn't organized, then you're very wrong, because we're organized up until November. We're organized up until 2021 during the mayor elections. We're organized when we're telling the people to get out and vote. We're organized when we're telling the people that they need to bring these issues to the table so that we can get representation inside of these buildings and get policy reform during these causes. So I feel as though we're pretty organized.
I think there's validity to what people say,
Yeah.
that we're not organized. I also don't think that it's necessarily specific to our gen. I think that honestly, like when things in past movements, everybody was not involved. So of course people are going to say that you're not organized if you were not riding the entire wave. But I do not think that we're that organized. But I also want to say that I don't think that we're less organized than previous movements.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're that organized because we have a lot of organizations, and it seems like, I can't speak for the world, but I can say in Chicago there are a lot of people doing the same things where we could literally designate different things to different people and we all work together, but we're repeating the same things. I think just now we're starting to try to communicate with each other and say, okay, what are you doing? Oh, you have that resource? Let's leverage it over here. I think that a lot of people are really gung-ho to spring things up in an entirety. I don't think it's a problem for people, like individuals, to get into it, but I just think there's a lot of things springing up without communication, without general communication. And I think that that's because of the mandate on our generation, because everybody wants something. Everybody wants their own EIN. Everybody wants their own check. It's just a lot. Like, I think and it's also because like this weird like expectation for like everybody to have their own thing and to be this weird leadership position exists. Going back to the spiritual thing, it's not everybody's calling to be on the mic, and there's too many people on the mic. It's too many people. Some people need to pack the lunches in the back. Some people need, who's going to drive the bus? Who's lookout? Who's doing medical? Everybody wants to be on the mic.
Brianna, what were you going to say?
I think that in terms of like why we're viewed as unorganized, I think there's such a miseducation of what civil rights was, and there was such like a culture of elitism, I think, that came with how we've been educated on civil rights, that our society can't conceptualize more than one person being the activist. So like, it's not easy to conceptualize Black Lives Matter being all over the country and not one person being the singular face, because when we're taught about civil rights, it's Martin, Rosa, maybe a little bit of Malcolm if you're lucky and you go to a liberal school who's ready to address Malcolm. But we've been educated on civil rights in a way that's been so selective and elitist that, you know, there's more than one Martin even in that civil rights point in time. We just don't know, you know, as a society who he is. So I think that's why when people say we're unorganized, it's that they can't box us into one place, point, and time. And that we are, yes, sort of all over the place, like as in this country, we have activists all over this country. So that's why, you know, we're just used to when we have big movements like this, there's always like one or two faces. With like, you know, white feminism, it was, you know, they had their singular face. With civil rights, we had our singular one or two faces. Even with the Black Panther movement, we have our singular face. Everything that's been taught about us in our liberation has been selective and really bred to be elitist. You know, white people I've seen now have been putting Martin Luther King on this pedestal of being this, you know, oh, so peaceful, white people loved him type of person, that they condemn the way we go about our liberation in a way that wasn't Martin-like, which is not even close to the truth because of the miseducation that we have on our, you know, liberation and civil rights in general. So I think that's just why it's been so hard for older generations to conceptualize that this doesn't have to be one person being the face of Black Lives Matter. Every Black person you see is a miracle and a revolutionary because of their presence on this planet. That is something that should be able to be seen as, you know, Black Lives Matter or unified organization.
I think it might intertwine, but that's like a perfect segue to like the second part of like the question. And because I was talking about this with my sister and my mom, and about like the resurgence and fight for Black Lives Matter. And my sister said that maybe what we are lacking from this movement is a central leader, someone like Martin Luther King or someone like Malcolm X. And so I wanted to ask, and like we were talking about that, like, is this true? Like, do you think that it would be better suited if there was like a one central leader? But then Brianna, you made a perfect point of saying that the way that its history has been viewed is that they've only shed a light they shed the white light on what white people saw was fit, what was palpable for them to take away.
You know, even just being an activist right now, being, you know, a specifically dark-skinned woman, I know that someone who looks like me probably is not going to be under that white light. It probably won't be anybody who looks like me. So when we talk about having to put a singular face, if we really think about it, who would be that singular face? What would they look like? Why would it be them? And I see it now, even with, you know, seeing the political figures that have been picked recently, we're picking singular faces in a way that's been acceptable and really just being able to be easily eaten up by white people. That's how we've been able to choose singular faces, and that's how we've been able to educate our students on Black liberation, and that in and of itself has to change.
I think that, who was talking?
Huh?
Oh, I said so true.
Oh, okay. I think that to answer your first question, a little bit, I think there is definitely validity to the mandate that, you know, our organizations, not, I would say our organizations, but our movements are not organized. Because I think it's very important to understand that not everyone at those marches believe that Black trans lives matter. Not everyone at those marches believe that, you know, Black women matter. And I think that's how you can have a Tory Lanez who weeks before shooting Megan Thee Stallion was at a march, and was in the news for being at the Black Lives Matter march, and then shot a Black woman without any remorse. And so all of that is really important to consider and remember. And I think also it's important to know that, like, what does a centralized, like, leader or lead organization matter when people are not even following the mandates that those organizations or leaders give? Because Black Lives Matter, the movement that many of us have been mobilizing around since 2014, the mandate that they gave was that we are built on Black feminism. We are built on the belief that Black queer lives matter. And that movement has now been co-opted to center the plight of Black men, cis, het Black men. And so it's like, what does it matter if we have a centralized leader or movement if people are not following the mandates, or if people are not following the word that folks are putting out there and saying, these are the people we will not be leaving behind. These are the people that will be coming with us. But yeah, Black trans folks, Black trans women specifically, have a life expectancy at 35 years old. When Black people with disabilities, when we can't even call Chadwick Boseman a disabled man without it being deemed disrespectful. My whole thing is, like, when we talk about organizing, I really think it also has to mean, like, are we teaching our folks the theory that needs to go with us, that needs to go forward with us? Are we feeding folks? Are we providing childcare to folks? Are we doing the nitty-gritty work that needs to cultivate a movement? And I think that we still have a long ways to go with that.
What I was going to say was that so much of the need for a leader stems from the capitalistic teaching that our pride, Black people, and the continent we come from has to do with the fact that we come from kings and queens. The fact that we had singular leaders, and that we were capable of essentially mimicking the structures that are valued currently even then. And that's the only validity. They don't talk about villages of women. They don't talk about water protectors. They don't talk about those who work with herbs and medicine people. Like, we don't find pride in those things. We find pride in the fact that we were able to do something that somewhat reflected the current system that we have. Because I honestly think that a lot of people who are fighting right now do not want freedom. They want Black supremacy.
Period.
And I don't say that to say that we are not, like, supreme and, like, just bomb, but I mean, like, I think that people really want to hold the whip. And that is even reflected in very liberal spaces, Gen Z spaces, millennial spaces, because we put the Black Lives Matter mandate up and we say, oh, you who grew up on the South Side, who only speaks in AAVE and didn't have this education, doesn't know these words, you can't come here because you don't understand these things. I think that's the same thing. And I think that to speak on what you said about, like, a lot of people not being on the same page in the movement, I think if we would really want to be revolutionary and, like, get free, like, we're going to have to be okay with that. We're going to have to be okay with everyone not being on the same page, because when we say liberation, it doesn't mean liberated if you know X, Y, and Z. It means you are truly free, and thus you will have the freedom to agree or disagree, to learn or not to learn, and then you will deal with those repercussions if needed.
And I think it's important to state, like, these folks, we can't leave them behind, period. Like, they are going to be on the vanguard of the movement that we are building, and that's it.
And I breaking into the downtown and looting everything's on fire and giving us the terrain to do what we need to do. It's done. So I'm giving their flowers now. And they can come and they can eat. And if they want to learn, they can learn. If they don't want to learn, we'll do it later. It's okay.
And to echo what Eva said earlier about that being white supremacy and capitalism showing up, that's 100% true. And that's what I meant earlier when I said that we need to be really vigilant about watching out for when those systems show up in the work that we do and show up in our relationships. The fact that we think that everything needs to be a nonprofit, that's white supremacy and capitalism showing up. The fact that we think that we need a centralized leader, that's white supremacy and capitalism showing up. And the thing about white supremacy and capitalism is they're very insidious structures. Like, I mean, we've been breathing this air since we were born. So to think that it's going to be easy to point those things out and say, oh, that's them showing up again, it's going to be difficult. But that's why it's important to also supplement the work that you're doing with reading, like with actual theory, with conversations, with like your best friends, all of that, like that, all that is so important. And it's important to surround ourselves and learn in community, because if not, like, where is this reflection coming from? Who's withholding our standards for us? Who's keeping us accountable? Like I think all of that is really important.
Just to add on that super quickly, what Melissa is talking about is just like the interpersonal work that you're doing, which is like when we go back outside of social media, what are you doing in your home? What conversations are you having at your dinner table? What conversations are you having in your school? What conversations are you having in your church? I've seen the way my church has reacted to this, and I've just sat back and I'm just like, the place where I'm getting my spiritual feeding is not even fully comprehensible of the work that God calls us to do, not to bring it back to that spiritual realm, but what are we doing in our interpersonal lives that is going to be able to bring more people in to this movement and to be ready to, check that, implicit bias, and maybe even bring people that they're, not really fully knowledgeable yet, but being okay to march alongside them and lead us to this area of liberation.
100%. And that brings me to my next question, that there are many different ways in which you can fight for Black Lives Matter. And Eva, you are the founder of the Free Route operation, which helps to build up Black and Brown communities in Chicago. So take me through your thought process in creating this type of organization as opposed to one that is centered around protesting and rallying.
Backstory, I founded the I Project when I was 16, and I learned and I grew, and I renamed it and relaunched it as the Free Route operation this summer, kind of as a culmination of the teachings that I've pulled down from God and spirits and people in my community, and also from Psalm chapter 1, verses 1-3, which basically draws the metaphor of a tree that is consistently able to sustain itself because its roots have access to a nearby river. And it's a perfect metaphor for what I think liberation would be for us. We always have what we need. We always have what we need. We always have food, we always have shelter, we always have access to leisure, we always have access to education, we always have access to healthcare, we always have access to each other. Like, we will always have what we need. And the question really has just been, how do we build to that? And I led protests. It's how I got my platform. I led this one really huge one in Chicago. And I've done things in Chicago that honestly, I do not know how I am still here to talk about them. But I have done things here on that front. And what I realized was that so much of protesting relies on asking somebody to set us free. And I don't think there's anything wrong protesting, because I think that something that protesting does that's really valuable is let people know this is a problem. You are valid in knowing and thinking this is a problem. And there are people who want to work to get these things done. And we're also telling these people, like, in power, like, yo, we not voting. Meanwhile, I think that so many of us need to look at the story of John the Conqueror, who took that horse.
Hey.
He took that horse. He was like, Devil said, if you don't know about John the Conqueror, I talk about this all the time. You don't know about John the Conqueror? John the Conqueror was like, I want to go marry your girl. And the devil was like, okay, well, you're going to have to pull these fields and you have to do it in a ridiculous amount of time that is impossible. And the daughter, she's like, I'm going to just kill you. He's going to kill you. Like, so there's no reason to pull in the fields. So he had an option. Like, basically the state tells him, this is how you get what you want. And he takes the horse, which was not a presented option. And I think what we're doing, like so many of us are doing, they're saying, okay, well, you have to do all these things at the lobby and get this bill passed, etc. And that's essentially the same as like plowing the field, where we need to take the horse. And so I support people on the ground. I do my things. I do a lot of things. But what Fro really seeks to do is take the horse. How do we get free regardless of what they're doing? Like, how are we good regardless of if we have an alderman that supports us or not? How are we good regardless of the tax increment funding that gets allocated to my community? How are we good regardless of the Chicago Public Schools budget that gets allocated this year? And regardless of the local people who want to invest into the school, how do we create structures that don't rely on them, but rely on us only?
I think so beautiful. And that's something that we talk about at GenZ Girl Gang a lot, is that we believe that our community has everything it needs in order to succeed. And so really cultivating and digging deep and having and sharing networks and our opportunities with each other in order to get everybody up, to bring everybody up, whether or not the outside world or the people outside of this community is a part of that change. And so that brings me to my other question. What does sisterhood mean to you, and how has it impacted your activism?
I can take this one. So growing up, my mom, she got us really involved in terms of activities outside of school, like extracurricular activities. So she made sure that we were really involved, because she used to be working like lots and lots of ridiculous hours and lots of jobs to make ends meet. And she's a single mother, and I am the youngest of, I would say, 6 in total, 6 of all of us. So I'm the youngest of 6, and then she's a single mother as well. So she would be working a bunch of jobs in order to make ends meet. And really, it was just my sisters who were changing my diapers. It was my sisters who were making sure I got to school in time, making sure that they picked me up from after school, to make sure that people weren't calling down my house if I missed school. So it was really my sisters. And then growing up, my sister had joined her sorority, and those sisters became my sisters. So I've really just been surrounded by Black women in general, just honestly being a part of my life, especially my mom, seeing the sacrifices that she's given me. And even though she wasn't there for every parent teachers conference, she made sure that she still showed up when she needed to show up. So really, it's the sisterhood that really kept me intact, and remembering like why my mom was doing this for us. And they always made sure that they reminded me of that. So I thank my sisters for a lot. So really, when I think about the activism that I do now, and making sure that I advocate for Black women and not just be an activist for them, instead just be an advocate for them, I just really remember like my sisters. And I had also, along with Freedom March NYC, me and the co-founder Nia-White, we had made sure that we organized a vigil for Black women after the death of Toyin. And honestly, just to remember like there's healing that needs to be done after this work. And when I was bawling, crying, I was just like, wow. And there was like a video that circled around, and it was just of me crying because I was thinking of it. And I was just honestly like, that could have been my sisters. That could have been the several sisters that I got throughout my whole entire life. That could have been my mother. That could have been anyone that I've known that is a Black woman. So really, sisterhood has been driving me to do this work, because it could have been me, it could have been them. So that's where my activism goes into my sisterhood.
On the opposite side of that end, I am an only child. It's just me and my mama and my dad, but my parents are separated, so he's not here with me. So it's just me and my mom in my house. And growing up again on Long Island, very segregated place, not a lot of brown people, period. Being the only Black girl in my class up until 7th grade, and then in high school, 8th grade to high school, being one of 11, I constantly craved Black sisterhood in my life. It was like honestly, it was a hole in me that just needed to be filled. And then when I got into activism, again, being on Long Island, and just honestly in this world, it's a naturally white co-opted space. So even in the work that I began doing at 13 and 14, it was also very white surrounded. So when I got to Unplug, I was so shocked to be in activism work and being able to be surrounded by Black women, because I didn't even know those two things could exist together. Like, I didn't know I could be an activist and still be surrounded by women who look like me. So when I got that opportunity, I valued it so much. And I tell our team, how much I love them and appreciate them, and just how much I'm able to learn more about myself. Because when you're like one or one of two, you don't get the opportunity to learn from sisters, which is why I'm valuing this right now, the opportunity to talk to other Black women and really be able to learn, because the world doesn't give us that very often. There's so few spaces that really come along, depending on where you are, that are like this, where you can just sit and talk and learn from people who look like you and not have to have your experiences trivialized and villainized and, politicized, and just having the opportunity to speak to people who just get it, period. Like, they get it and they know what you've been through and they know what you're going through. And then speaking to people who are older than you, who know how to shape you into, all right, when you probably get here, you're gonna go through this, this, and this. Like, white kids get to hear that. They get to know how to prepare for, what hits them. In this work, I didn't really get any way to prepare for it. So whenever I am in spaces like this, I constantly just want to learn and just continue to build community in this work, especially among my Black sisters.
I feel that wholeheartedly. And also, like, me being the youngest of 7, I got the sisterhood from my 3 older sisters, and then I also had my brothers from my 3 older brothers. But my sisters, my girls, like, they get me through like everything, especially growing up on Long Island in Port Washington, this white ass town, rich ass town, and I'm like the complete opposite of that. And like having my community just like being literally surrounding where I live, that community was everything that got me through, especially and it was shown when I hosted the rally that Brianna was a part of in my town, and it was led, and the only people that spoke there was Black young women and people that I grew up with. And I'm like, it just goes to show like our strength and our our instant connection, which is also like why I wanted to create this as well. So Melissa and Eva, if you want to share your sisterhood stories, that'd be cool too.
When I think of sisterhood, I think specifically about the historical resistance of Haitian women and how Haitian women resist through sisterhood. There's the way that Haitian women relate to one another is if I have a cup of rice today and you have none, I will split that in half with you. And then the next time when you have a cup of rice and I have none, I will split mine with you. And I think sisterhood is really a life-sustaining force. I mean, since we're talking about our families, I grew up in a household of 3 brothers. I'm the only girl. And I think I was always on the seek for sisterhood, but I think because I grew up in a male-dominated household, I don't think I was always ready for sisterhood, because I did have a lot of internalized, patriarchal beliefs. And so I think sisterhood too, it's also something that everyone isn't always ready for at the specific time that they may think they're ready for it. Because I think to be a sister, it requires a lot of you. To be in family with anyone requires a lot of you. It requires foresight to know that like how your actions are going to make the other person feel. It requires empathy to be able to relate to one another on a very deep level. It requires compromise and understanding that like there are times when in order for you to coexist with one another, you will have to make tough decisions. And I think overall, like now that I have my group of sisters, and it's not, I don't think every relationship is the same. For me, like I'm just really grateful because I don't really think I could get through half the shit I've been going through without them there. And I think for me, like when I am in family with folks, when I'm in sisterhood with folks, it's really about giving what I can. And if that means giving the last cup of rice or the last half of it, then that's what we're gonna do. And then when they have it, they're gonna give it to me. And so I think it's a partnership. It's making sure that like you're giving and taking as much as you need and as much as the other person is willing to give.
My first sisterhood experience, I mean, was until I was like around 8 or 9. So from birth until I was 8 or 9, I had an older cousin who I was raised with. She was 10 years older than me. And I got on her nerves all the time. And I used to get her in trouble on purpose. But she was just, she showed me grace. And I really don't think that I would have an appreciation for the hood if it wasn't for her. And her brother, talk about sisterhood, but her brother, who kind of like brought me along to places and showed me the counter argument to what the news was showing people about what was happening in my communities. After that, I craved sisterhood, but I fell into the trap that many, many people fall into, which is that we don't show our friends or our sisters, our chosen family, the same amount of care that we would try to show a partner. I think that a lot of people get wrapped into the idea of, if I really want to get to know someone and like do this relationship work, it's going to be with a partner and not with these friends. And I wasn't taught to necessarily do that type of work with friends or sisters. And I honestly did not feel like I had sisterhood until I met some of the people who were doing the same work that I was doing, like Deja and Nepal and Winter Minnesee, other people who were thrown into the Gen Z mandate, and we navigated it together. But one of the things that they all taught me was that there's room for all of us here, and that we can be more than a monolith, which was hard for me because as a plus size Black woman, I often get managed. Like I deal with misogyny and I deal with the magnification of my body. And so to have other people who were a little bit more privileged than me in that regard also validate my experiences and hold space for me as a human being and a leader and a flawed individual, I think that that's life-changing. That was a long answer, but that's my relationship.
Thank you so much. We had like 3 more other questions to hit, but we are over the mark and I don't want to take up more of your time than necessary. I mean, unless you want to, because I could talk to y'all all day, 100%, truly. But I think we're going to wrap it up. And how I wanted to wrap it up, I think I was thinking about this earlier in the car when I was trying to choose what place to go to eat. What is one word or one thought or one phrase that is that you're going to take from this conversation into like the rest of your day or the rest of your life, or maybe just one thought or feeling you feel after this conversation? I can start. I feel really inspired. I feel really comforted in knowing that there are dope-ass Black women doing the damn thing and who are so complex and intelligent, and there's so many different varying levels to what each and every single one of you do, that I'm inspired to do more, soul searching for me, to be better, to be more like you all, in a sense. So I'm feeling inspired and grateful.
Yeah. I think I could go next. I definitely feel I can definitely say I feel comforted. I also feel in touch with the spiritual sense of it. Because I'm surrounded by people who feel and do the same work I do, just in different entities. So it's really just remembering like we're all doing so many different things, but it's for the same reason. And I'm just proud to be amongst the beautiful Black women you all are, and just doing this work and having these type of conversations. And also in terms of feeling wanting, in terms of the spiritual sense of it, like I've been, I don't think I have had a time throughout this whole entire year to really just be in touch with the spiritual sense of it, unless it's just a Sunday. And usually I talk to my God every single day. So really, especially during times like this, where literally I get out of school, do my homework, I then probably go organize with my team, then to go do outreach to the community, then to go talk about policy reform, to then go talk about this for the whole entire night, then have interviews like this and conversations like this in different forms. So it's really just, I haven't had a time to really have a thought process with my God and with my spiritual sense of it. So really, I'm just happy that this conversation was brought up, because it really just reminds me like the work that I do is given and provided through God. And I also have a quote that was said to me by like my role model slash my idol, which is my sister. So she told me after I had graduated, and she had told me like, and she was so proud of me, and she was just telling me like, Nia, God doesn't call the prepared, he prepares those who he calls. So it's really just reminds me like, real talk, like God prepares you for the things that he wants you to do. So it's really just inspiring to me that God has called us all together to do this work. So that's my long spiel.
I feel really good. I feel heard, and I feel also just like very happy and thrilled that this panel of people of different ages, we're striving for some of the same things. We're all doing the work, and it just like talking with more people around my age who are doing this is affirming. It makes me value community more. And so I feel that way. I definitely want to keep in touch with everybody on here. So I'm feeling like that giddy type of, oh, we just like chatted, we about to go like step. Yeah.
I definitely feel a huge sense of love, which makes sense. I'm a naturally super emotional person. I cry all the time. And I just like, I'm a very lovey-dovey person too. Like I'm always like, oh, let me give you a hug type of person. Like I want to give you all a hug right now. And I think, again, just going back to that place of I was without Black women for so long in my life that I love every opportunity I get like this. And I just appreciate knowing that I'm not alone in this work, because it can feel very lonely sometimes, especially when you don't have a lot of women who look like you in it. So I'm just glad that I have like a new set of sisters and friends that I can, go to, when this work feels very tolling and emotionally burdening. I'm just glad that I have people and community that I can rely on and just like show more love to, and just like really infuse the work that we do in love.
For me, the word that's sticking with me as we leave is girlhood. To kind of go back to the question that Jade originally asked when we started, I think rooted in the return to our imaginations, our fantasies of what a better world would look like. I think it's returning to an innate youth aspect of who we are. And when I think about, Black womanhood, I think Black girls are too often pushed to be grown too fast. And I don't think it's necessarily something that we naturally seek, but I think it's definitely in the way that we are sexualized, the way that we are given just too much responsibility at a young age. And when I speak to all of you, after hearing all of you speak, I think what I'm also getting from this is, as amazing as we all are, as resilient as we all are, we have been pushed to adulthood way too quickly. And I think for me, as someone who's been doing this work since I was 14, like there's so much sacrifices that I've had to make in order to do this work and to fight for a better world for Black folks. And so something that I've really been trying to resist recently is like the title of Black woman, and really thinking, do I still feel like a Black girl? And I think in a lot of aspects, I still want to be mothered and I still want to be cared for in the way that a young girl would want to be. And so hearing all of you speak and having this type of conversation, it just makes me think of girlhood, and how it's something that we all deserve to experience, and that it's not too late to experience that. It's never too late to experience that, no matter how old you are.
Yeah. And a quick comment. I'm sorry, I just love talking to you guys. Just a quick comment, honestly. What you guys also had made me think of, especially Eva, with your topic of feeling heard, really when we talk, or when people talk about Black women, it's really the idea that Black women are always arguing, Black women are always angry, when really Black women are able to have different opinions, and we are entitled to have different opinions because we are not the same person and we are different beings. So really, when I think about having this conversation, we can be asked so many different questions and we can all have the different answers. And I'm happy that we have different answers, because that means that we have different viewpoints and we're not all the same. So when we're doing different work and we're going about it different ways, it really just inspires me, because that means that there's so many people going at the same exact front, just so many different ways, and meaning that there will be a proper end result. So really, I'm just happy that we're able to come to agreement for so many different opinions.
I love this so much. So thank you all so much for coming, and I hope we all go forth and prosper in our Black girl magic and our Black girl glory. I'm glad that we got this opportunity to do this and got everyone on this call at the same time. I am so thankful for each and every single one of you, and make sure people who are watching to go check out their Instagrams and all their work, and support them in their work and everything that they're doing. And so I'll see you all next time. Thank you so much. And yes, Brianna, I will send an email with everybody's socials and whatnot. But yes, I'm gonna stop recording because we're done.